The Russian armed forces are the world's fifth largest military force, with 1.15 million active duty personnel and close to 2 million reservists. Russia ranks second in military strength with approximately 1.15 million active personnel and a total military force exceeding 3.5 million when including reserves. The country has a defense budget of about $109 billion and possesses around 4,000 aircraft, including advanced fighters like the Su-57 and MiG-29. The primary responsibilities of the Russian ground forces are the protection of the state borders, combat on land, and the defeat of enemy troops. The President of Russia is the Supreme Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation. The Commander-in-Chief of the Russian Ground Forces is the Chief Commanding Authority of the Russian Ground Forces. He is appointed by the President of Russia. The main command of the ground forces is based in Moscow. As the Soviet Union dissolved, efforts were made to keep the Soviet armed forces as a single military structure for the new Commonwealth of Independent States. The last Minister of Defense of the Soviet Union, Marshal Yevgeny Shaposhnikov, was appointed Supreme Commander of the CIS Armed Forces in December 1991. 6. Among the numerous treaties signed by the former republics in order to direct the transition period was a temporary agreement on general-purpose forces, signed in Minsk on February 14, 1992. However, once it became clear that Ukraine, and potentially the other republics, was determined to undermine the concept of joint general-purpose forces and form their own armed forces, the new Russian government moved to form its own armed forces. Russian President Boris Yeltsin signed a decree forming the Russian Ministry of Defense on May 7, 1992, establishing the Russian ground forces along with the other branches of the Russian armed forces. At the same time, the General Staff was in the process of withdrawing tens of thousands of personnel from the group of Soviet forces in Germany, the northern group of forces in Poland, the central group of forces in Czechoslovakia, the southern group of forces in Hungary, and from Mongolia. 37 Soviet ground forces divisions had to be withdrawn from the 4 groups of forces in the Baltic states, and 4 military districts, totaling 57 divisions, were handed over to Belarus and Ukraine. Some idea of the scale of the withdrawal can be gained from the division list. For the dissolving Soviet ground forces, the withdrawal from the former Warsaw Pact states and the Baltic states was an extremely demanding, expensive, and debilitating process. As the military districts that remained in Russia after the collapse of the Union consisted mostly of the mobile cadre formations, the ground forces were, to a large extent, created by relocating the formerly full-strength formations from Eastern Europe to under-resourced districts. However, the facilities in those districts were inadequate to house the flood of personnel and equipment returning from abroad, and many units were unloaded from the rail wagons into empty fields. The need for destruction and transfer of large amounts of weaponry under the Treaty on Conventional Armed Forces in Europe also necessitated great adjustments. In 2003, Kommersant newspaper published a map of the Russian military presence abroad. In 2018, it was reported that Russia operates at least 21 significant military facilities overseas. How big is a Russian battalion? The most common variant is a motorized rifle battalion with an attached tank company, self-propelled howitzer battalion, air defense platoon, engineer squad, and logistics support. There are normally 2 such attachments in an Arctic brigade. Most BTGs have 700 to 800 personnel.